Tidgewell, and this is the second episode of the Shot Clock Sports Podcast. I'm joined today by my co-host Jack Seagroat, and in this episode we will be doing an NBA Finals recap, going over some NBA draft prospects for next week, and discussing our early predictions for next NBA seasons, along with possible fallers and climbers during the NBA offseason. In terms of teams. So getting right into it, Jack, what are your takeaways from, it was games 3, 4, and 5 following our first episode. What are your takeaways from the end of the series?
I thought it was a big. I was very surprised. Just based off what I thought from the beginning of the series to now, I did think the Celtics would win after Game 2, being up 2-0, but I did think the Mavs were at least forced to 6, and I was really impressed just the continued dominance by this clearly all-time great Celtics team with an incredible rotation of those 6 players that all are, I mean, just great starting caliber players. And even with Tatum not playing nearly up to par, the other guys were able to pick up the load offensively and defensively and really show out.
Yeah, I do think this was really great team basketball by the Celtics. I'll give tons of props to the Celtics front office. Not only getting that young duo of Tatum and Jaylen Brown 6-7 years ago, but I think also the acquirements this year of Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday were huge for the team. I think that's really what put them over the top and at a championship level status. And they played great team basketball. That's how they did it. There really was no superstar in this series. We'll get into our takes on the finals MVP later. But going back to what you said about Jason Tatum, obviously I think most people would agree a lackluster performance for what his expectations were going into this championship series. I could even start with this one. I think Tatum's game 4 was ridiculous. Game 3 was ridiculously overrated. Was that the game where he had 31, I believe?
31 was last night.
31 was last night. What did he have in game 3? Maybe 30 more? He had 31 again, but on 11 of 26 shooting, and he was terrible from 3. And while he did have 31 points on only 5 free throw attempts, many people will say, well, how can you say he's not a great scorer in that game? I think a lot of his baskets were from open shots due to the great passing and spacing that the Celtics have. And there's really no opportunity to double team or have a defense ready to go against Tatum. So in many cases, they're doubling somebody else, and Tatum was knocking down some open shots. He was also missing some open shots. And when it was contested, I think he was having a poor shooting performance. So for that reason, I think that performance from him was extremely overrated, even though the Celtics won the game. They almost collapsed, allowing, what was it, like a 20-point comeback from the
They were
Maverick.
down 29 and they made it a 9-point game at one point.
Yeah, so well, I do think he had a great game 5 in that to win the series. I do think the first 4 games were not at all what I expected. I do view Tatum as fairly overrated, but still I expected more out of him, especially because he doesn't really lack the experience. He's been in the playoffs almost every year of his career, has been to the finals. So I wanted to see more out of him, especially knowing that the Celtics were going to win the series. I would have thought it would have been a big couple of games for him. But no, not really. What do you have to add on?
Yeah, I mean, disappointing, but I mean, that's why he didn't win Finals MVP. And he still got the championship, though, and that's mostly what people remember. But I think this should
Yeah.
show that people around the league that he isn't a top 5 player, so don't mistake him for one.
Yeah, I definitely think you mentioned this in the last episode. I would not put him in that elite top of the group, even with Jokic. I'd say Giannis. I guess people would probably put Embiid, Shea, and Luka up there. Obviously, Luka had a very disappointing finals, but
I don't think
I think
I don't think you can put Embiid up there. Embiid is not up there.
Maybe not with injuries, but I just know a lot of people. I don't
Yeah,
consider
but
him at the top.
I
I
mean,
also
he's
consider him.
underperformed. I was watching the Bill Simmons podcast today, and they were going over just Embiid's playoff career. And I mean, he is not like he's underperformed, and he's 30 years old, and he's underperformed in every single playoff series in his or every single playoff run overall in his career. He's not overperformed
Yeah,
once,
I would say
which
obviously he's been extremely disappointing in the playoffs, but I still think you have to give him his props for how good he is at scoring the ball. So maybe you don't put him in that top superstar range of what I would say is Luka, Jokic, Giannis, and Shea, but I think he's probably in the group right outside of it, maybe teetering on the edge. If he had more playoff success, I would put him in that top five, but
absolutely,
I,
yeah, he'd
I
be on
guess
the
I still
top right
hold
behind
out
you.
on that playoff success. But going back to Tatum, I think he showed that he's not in that group. Obviously, he's a great player, but I don't think he's what everyone I love, especially Celtics fans, hype him up to be. But moving over to the Finals MVP, Jaylen Brown. Um, what do you think of the decision to give it to Jaylen Brown? Right choice?
Yep, right choice. Hoping Drew Holiday could pull out another great game and maybe steal it from him, but Jalen Brown was definitely the right choice, even with the poor Game 5.
Yeah, I obviously that game five for him was dreadful, but they got the job done, so it doesn't really matter. And I think during those first four games, he was the main offensive weapon for the team, especially and that game too was Drew Holiday, but I think he was very explosive. Sort of started and had gave the Celtics momentum for these long runs that they went on throughout the series. So I do think Jaylen Brown was the right pick. Averaged 20 points per game. Other guys didn't really meet that threshold of what you see in a Finals MVP. Porzingis, I would have loved to see him win it, but with 20 minutes per game, he just didn't have a chance. I mean, if you had him playing 40, if he was healthy, playing 40 like Jalen and Tatum, I think he would have had a great shot at it because he was playing great when he was in the game. Um, but yeah, it stings that he was unhealthy. It didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But so I do think Jaylen Brown was the right pick. Finally, on the NBA Finals, what do you think of just the Celtics run altogether? Obviously, one of the weaker years for the East in recent memory, and playoff schedule filled with injured teams.
Yeah, probably the weakest run we've ever seen, at least in my lifetime. But it doesn't change the fact that I think they are an all-time great team. It did feel weird. It was almost like them winning was like it felt like it wasn't supposed to happen. It's like the Bills winning the Super Bowl. It's like weren't they supposed to choke? What happened? But they did win. I thought they kind of I don't know. I think the Mavericks kind of had a lucky run, especially don't want to show bias here, but PJ Washington and Derek Jones, who were Klay Thompson, Steph Curry from three against the Thunder, all of a sudden was Ben Simmons and Shaq from three in this series. So I don't know if this series they were just really
Mhm.
cold or the Thunder series they were just really hot. And that ultimately, because I mean, looking at the Celtics, I mean, KP was injured and Jason Tatum was playing horrible. You can make a great argument that those are the two best, maybe not the best, the two most impactful players in the team, and yet the Celtics or the Mavericks couldn't even make it close. And I
Yeah,
think it's a combination of both. The Mavericks kind of got lucky getting here, and they just didn't play up to how they've been playing in the Western Conference in general. But the Celtics, great team. Congratulations on winning the championship.
yeah, I totally agree with what you said. The Mavs, I do think their series win against the Thunder was fantastic, but I think their Western Conference Finals against the Timberwolves. I mean, the Timberwolves had to battle seven very hard fought games against the Nuggets, and I think that sort of just drained them. And
I think it was also the
Mav
emotional high of winning Game 7 that affected them
Yeah,
mentally.
totally. And it was such a big win for the franchise that I think with the Mavs execution, as you noted earlier, it was just too much for
Yep.
the Timberwolves to overcome. Tired and maybe a little excited from that big win in Game 7 against the Nuggets. That almost felt like I wouldn't say a championship, but close to it for many Timberwolves fans. So I think that definitely was a fall back to earth, losing to the Mavericks. Um, and yeah, I don't think obviously coming out of what was a stacked West that the Mavs were the best team. I'd probably still say, coming from a Timberwolves fan too, it probably was the Nuggets. Um, but obviously,
Yes.
Timberwolves pulled it out there. I think the Nuggets would have beat the Mavs if the Nuggets had beat the Timberwolves. Um, so I think the Mavs obviously went through a gauntlet. I'm going to not take any credit away from them, but they didn't have to play the Nuggets, and the Nuggets, I think, would have beat the Mavs and beat the Celtics. I think the Timberwolves were really the only team that was able to stop them, and they did. Um, so yeah, and obviously going back over to the East, the Celtics played so many injured teams in the playoffs. No Jimmy Butler for the Heat. Who they play second round was the Cavaliers. They had no Donovan
Cavs.
Mitchell. Who they play? Cavs.
Yeah, Cavs.
Yeah, no Donovan Mitchell for half that series, and then no Tyrese Halliburton for half the series in the conference finals. You also look at other teams that didn't even play. Knicks severely injured. Sure, that's on Coach Thibodeau. Plays his guys too much, but still.
Yep.
In the Bucks, tons of injuries to Dame, Middleton, Giannis. I mean, they never really had a shot with all those guys out and not 100% healthy. So, I mean, obviously injuries are part of the game, and when you're playing better in the regular season, you can sit your guys more, and your guys are going to be more healthy, and they're going to be ready to come for the playoffs. And when you beat teams early in the playoffs, you're going to have more time to rest. So, yes, it is part of the game. Do I think the Celtics gained from parts of it where they weren't as misfortunate? Definitely. You have any takes on that?
Yeah, I think no matter how much you think the battle testing is important, rest overall and the rest. I don't think there's a huge rest disparity between the conference finals matchups, but just in general, that easy 5 game series and then another easy 5 game series in rounds 1 and 2 versus the Clippers and Thunder series. And then, I mean, the Timberwolves series, even though it didn't last as long as the Pacers series, was much harder than the Pacers series. So I think that rest is just one of the many differences and factors that went into the Celtics dominating the series and ultimately winning in 5 games.
Okay, so that'll do it for our NBA Finals recap there. Congrats to the Boston Celtics. But now moving on towards next season, we have the NBA Draft coming up next week. Um, I haven't really done much. This is what many people are calling a lackluster year for the draft, but I'll ask you, who's your favorite prospect for this year?
My favorite prospect is definitely Reed Shepard. Even with the lackluster draft, I think he's a great floor spacer, could also create. Um, I think we could look at some team. I don't think the Hawks would pick him, but I think we could look at the Wizards, Rockets, or Spurs possibly trading up to get him at 1, considering it should be pretty easy to trade up with the poor draft and the fact that they're worried that a team in front of them might take, or a team might jump in front of them to take their guy, Reed Shepard. So, yeah, I think maybe he doesn't have the highest potential, but I think he's a very safe pick, and that no matter what, I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Everything you said, he showed a lot of potential throughout his career so far. And I think it will be interesting to see what the Hawks do with the first overall pick. We could talk more about that later with possible other offseason moves. But I'll tell you, my guy, I don't think this will be a guy that goes super early, but Dalton Netsch out of Tennessee. I really like him as a three-level scoring forward. Um, from three, the mid range, inside, he's just been tremendous. His 2023 2024 averaged 22 points per game on 40% from three and 46% from the field. Um, His free throw percentage wasn't great, only 77%. Um, he's very healthy. Played 36 games, above 30 games in all of his college seasons. And I think during March Madness he was extremely underrated with how good he showed he really was. Um, especially in the Elite Eight and the Final Four with games against Creighton and Purdue. Against Creighton, he had 26 points, shot 43% from three, very efficient. And then against Purdue, had his best game of the tournament, 37 points, uh, 50% from three, 45% from the field, 37 minutes, and almost took down what many people were saying what it was the second best team in the country. So I think he was very impressive. He showed that he has that sort of grit that I think a lot of teams look for, along with the talent needed to succeed at the higher level. He's a tremendous scorer, and he's the sort of guy where you tell him, "Go get me a basket." He can go get you a basket anywhere you need it. I think that was what was so great about him. No matter who people were guarding him with during the tournament, he was just finding ways to beat them, and that's why I really like whatever team's gonna draft him. 6'5". This ESPN lists him at 205 pounds, so kind of slight for how tall he is, but which I think he'll definitely have to work on to play at the NBA level. But I think he definitely has the talent. He definitely has that grit that NBA front offices look for. So yeah, Dalton Netsch, look out for him in the draft, Tennessee.
Yeah, I think new updated measurements are 6'6", 213. So he's still slight in stature, but not like too slight where we got some guys earlier in the draft like Sar
Yeah.
and Zachariah Rasacha, or whatever you say his last name. Both are a lot skinnier.
Mm. Yeah. So moving on, this is gonna sort of go with the draft. We'll sort of just go with the off season altogether. Who are some possible? What do you want to start with? Teams going up or teams going down this NBA offseason?
Um, I don't care. You choose.
No, well, let's start with teams going down this NBA offseason. This can include the draft, free agency, who they might be losing, who's a team you see on a downwards trajectory.
Um, I think this might be a little bit of a hater mentality, as I'm not a fan of this team, but I think we could see the Warriors having a big drop off. I don't see them being able to get anyone, and even if they do, I don't think they're going to get the right fit because they need a big man. They're not going to do that. I don't know why. And I think we could see. Let's. I don't. It looks. It looked like Clay was going to go back, but I mean, now it doesn't. They don't have a first round pick. They have basically no money. They'll release Chris Paul, which should at least free up something. So it looks like Clay's gonna go, but maybe they'll sign some small guys. But Curry is regressing now. Draymond is out of control. I don't right now. I mean, they were maybe the 18th or 19th best team in the league. I think some teams are going to make a jump over them, and we're going to be looking at them in the low 20 range. And then next offseason, or maybe even by the trade deadline, we're going to be seeing some Curry trade talk.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say the dynasty's over. The guys are just getting too old, and they don't have the draft capital needed to have a quick rebuild, especially around Steph Curry in his waning years. That's actually the Warriors is who I was going to go with, but I'll change it up. I'll throw two teams out there. First, I'll start with the Milwaukee Bucks. Terrible ending to the season. Chose to hire Doc Rivers about, I think it was 50 games in. That wasn't great. I think they had a losing record during the Doc Rivers era. Obviously, they were dealt with tremendous amounts of injury with Giannis during the regular season and then Dame and Middleton in that first round. So I'm not sure what the owner and the front office will choose to chalk this season up to. If they'll choose to just run it back, say injuries happen, we'll be ready to go next year, or if they maybe move on from Doc Rivers, maybe they look to trade some guys. I don't know. I mean, we didn't Dame and Giannis worked first half of the year, and then yeah, injuries like I noted earlier, but ended unsuccessfully. So I don't know what they're gonna do. They're tied up in a lot of money. Do you have anything to add on to the Bucks?
Yeah, I definitely could see a fall off, but I think we could see. I'm more leaning on the side of improvement. I think, according to Doc Rivers, I mean, he's not very trustworthy, but he says that with Dame requesting a trade, he wasn't really practicing during the offseason, worried about injuries, and just wanted to get out of Portland. So we saw a Dame that was not prepared for the season, and that we're going to see a Dame next season who's going to be much more prepared and much better. If we see that, I think him and Giannis could be the best duo in the league. But also, who knows? We might even see. Giannis has been kind of hinting at a trade for years, and I think it'd be very interesting for him to request a trade and see where that leads to.
Yeah. I totally agree with what you said about Dame. We could see a better version of the Dame of Damian Lillard, but at the same time, we're going to see an older version of Dame. We're going to see him more. He's having surgery, right? So we're going to see a Damian Lillard recovering from surgery. So I don't know. Could be worse for all we know. And like you said, Giannis with all his trade talk, I don't think it's going to happen. But I just don't know. I think the Bucks could regress this year, and maybe Giannis is traded the following offseason. The other team I wanted to throw out there is the Phoenix Suns. Um,
Absolutely.
the West is stacked, and I think the Suns went in with very high hopes after getting Bradley Beal, Yusuf Nurkic, obviously paired with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. This was viewed as possibly one of the greatest offensive meshes of all time. But you look at this season, tremendously disappointing, losing to the Timberwolves in the first round. Um, they're tied up in all this money, and I don't know if they'll ever make it out the West in the rest of Kevin Durant's career. So I really don't know which way they move going forward.
Yeah. Apparently, there's some talk about them possibly picking Bronny and then LeBron signing on a minimum contract with them, which would be very interesting. That'd be a lot of talent in their top four. And then unfortunately, they might be a top team in the West at that point. Just like it wouldn't. I mean, I don't know how it'd mesh. Actually, I think it would mesh pretty well. I mean, they don't. They're lacking some playmaking right now, and LeBron can give them that. And especially with the Bron we saw last year, who shot 41% from three, that could be big. But I also don't buy that as a story or like a real possibility.
Yeah,
I don't know why Bron. I think Bron is looking more at let his son play 1 year without him, and then the next year will be his final year, and he'll play 1 year with Bronny after that. After his son gets his feet wet in the NBA first.
yeah. I don't think I would count on the LeBron James to Phoenix story. I there's nowhere through I could see him signing for that minimum contract just to play with his son. If anything,
I could see that just not this year.
I think it'd be much more likely he's just going to bring his son to LA with him. Um, but yeah, we'll see. I don't think it'll happen this year on the Suns. I think they're in a tremendously bad spot. Obviously, we could just see better play out of their guys, and Bradley Beal was hurt for part of the year. But once again, injuries are part of the game. So yeah, I don't really know. The West is stacked, man. I don't know if they'll ever get past the Timberwolves. Timberwolves, Thunder, Nuggets. I think you could make the case are all getting better. Sure, the Timberwolves are tied up in some money problems and have a couple guys getting older. But they also have a
Same
couple
with
guys.
the Nuggets. Nuggets have some big
Yeah,
problems. They're probably going to lose
but with
KCP.
the Timberwolves, you also have guys. Anthony Edwards, he's going to keep getting better. Nas Reed, going to keep getting better. Um, so I'm not really sure what to make of them. Yeah, like you said, Nuggets easily could get worse because they're also tied up in some money problems. But moving over to climb teams that could climb forwards this NBA offseason, who do you got?
I think there's a couple teams I'm looking at for climbing forwards. A wild card that I really don't know about, but just based off their ending is the Sixers based on who they signed. Like I feel like if they can get Paul George or somehow Jimmy Butler or something like that, it's only up from there. But a team maybe depending, I think the Magic could be someone that especially if they can find just a better shooting, honestly, because their offense is pretty atrocious last year. Defense is obviously great. Paulo's a bit overrated, but I think he can really step into form once he can get another good uh, creator around him. Not just a playmaker, but someone who can really put the ball on the floor and actually score, not just pass, and give him like almost make him like a 1B, not a main option, which I think he'll become eventually, but he's not really one right now, which is why we saw him be so inefficient this year. Another team would be the Pelicans, obviously, if Zion's healthy. So I think the Pelicans with Zion, and then the Magic, hopefully looking for an improved star, maybe even Paul George. And then those two teams making a jump this year to maybe even the conference finals if they're really moving.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said about the Sixers and Magic. Just they both have a lot of money to spend, and I think they could really bring in both teams could bring guys that would tremendously help their teams. And the East, obviously, very weak year. I do think it. Obviously, you have the Celtics, but I do think it's up for grabs, especially if the Sixers could bring in a big name, and the Magic. Very young team. Everyone's getting better. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in more of like a veteran superstar sort of guy. I don't know exactly who that would be, but I think the team would really benefit from it. Especially, yeah, what you said, Paulo Banchero. I think the Magic have a great future set up for them. Um, I'll throw out the New York Knicks. Um, I'd say it's a mix of a lot of guys. This is the first time we're going to see the full team that they built at the trade deadline all healthy to start the year, which I think is going to be very exciting for New York. You look at how good they were playing down the stretch. You're going to add Julius Randle back to that. I mean, that'll be great. I think they are somehow being somewhat slept on right now.
Yeah,
Obviously, I think they were extremely overrated when they won their first round matchup. Uh, but after that sort of died down, I think they've sort of grown to underrated with where they will rank in the East next year. I think they could be a tremendous team. And I do think there's a chance that they go out and they make a move, um, bringing in more of a superstar player to pair with Brunson. Well, I do think you have your superstar in Brunson, but I could see them bringing in another great player. Or if they're not going to add a great player, just adding some depth to this roster. This team could be so great with just a little bit more depth. That way, if Tibbs isn't forced to play his guys 40 minutes, which I just think is killing. That's what kills this team. That's what killed this team this year. So that's just something I'd love to see. I definitely think they're a team that could grow this offseason.
absolutely. How about we play a little bit of what would you do? Spend about
Okay.
10 or 15 minutes on this. We'll give each other three teams just one by one, and then we'll go into what we think we do for the team. So I'll go first. I'll give you the Hawks.
Hawks. Yeah, obviously you noted this earlier. I would not use that first round pick. Eh, I would not use that first round pick unless you're committed to the rebuild. I don't think you can keep Trey and trade DeJounte Murray because I think DeJounte Murray wants out, right?
Yes.
So
I don't know. It's kind of confusing there. I think no matter what, whether they want out or not, one of them is going to get traded just based off the plus minus numbers and just eye test. You can see that they each play better when they're on their own. So there's just
yeah,
no way.
I just don't know. I don't know how much you're going to get offered for the first overall pick. You could try and package DeJounte with this first overall pick, maybe bring in a real superstar to pair with Trey Young. Once again, not sure who that would be. Some people have rumored Kevin Durant. Uh, Not entirely sure on that. Uh, I mean, that would be tremendous offense. I noted earlier what the Suns have with Kevin Durant. Imagine Trey Young and KD paired together. But still, I think that team really lacks. depth overall. So I honestly, I'm not sure where the Hawks begin. I think they're in a bad spot where they're not going to get a lot worse, but they're not going to get much better. They're going to keep hanging around the middle of the pack, which, so either you blow it up or you try to go in big for the next couple of years and then blow it up. Personally, I guess I would hold on to Trae Young. I do think he's a great offensive talent. I would get DeJounte Murray in that first overall pick, shop it around, find a superstar to pair with Trae. Maybe you try and add a little bit of depth to the lineup. And I mean, this team still made the play in. So I do think there's room for growth that is feasible and uh, is definitely possible for this team to not have to be a play-in team, make the playoffs. And especially in the East, you never know what could happen. Um, I'll give you a team now. Ooh. How about team coming off the NBA Finals loss, Dallas Mavericks?
That's a good one. Right now the only pick they have this offseason is 58. They obviously gutted up their draft capital during the regular season with the trade deadline and just getting some players, which so far has made the right decision considering they were in the NBA Finals. Um, but just talking about this next season, I think for them to improve, I think they need to go after a guy that they don't need to be a super like great on ball creator, but some sort of. I think them having Luca Kyrie's great, but they need some sort of real scorer when it comes to the forward spot or the center spot. And maybe Lively can be that next season. Gafford definitely won't be, but I doubt it. I think Lively will always just be kind of just a good defender and a good just pick and roll big that can set some good screens, lob threat, finish at the rim, but nothing great. Like no elite offensive center. So
Yeah, so
maybe
would you say,
doubt. I
I
doubt
was,
Paul
you
George will
think,
work just money wise.
do you think that, so
What
you
were you
think
gonna
the
say?
Mavs would make moves in order to make a run in the West next year?
Yeah. I think Paul George is probably gonna be too expensive unless you can facilitate a sign and trade, getting rid of guys like Gafford who just wasn't playing well in the finals and Josh Green. But just signing wise, maybe some lower level guys like Harrison Barnes maybe, or maybe even finding a way to trade for Bridges, which is some maybe the Nets get back some good role players and younger players that maybe they see fit for their future. Because yeah, I would say that's where they need to go. I don't think they can keep the same team though. I think they got a little bit lucky, and I think having those two forwards of PJ Washington, Derek Jones, and them both being either low 30% or sub 30% 3-point shooters will not work again in a full playoff run.
All right. Uh, and to end this episode, I think let's go with obviously very early prediction. But who do you think is best equipped to knock off the Celtics next year? Whether it's someone in the East or whoever will be coming out of the West. Who do you have?
Let's just talk East for now. I would say, I mean, it really just depends on how the offseason goes. Whether, I mean, I think it's got to be the. I don't think the Pacers are really in the running. I think it's going to be Knicks, Bucks, or Sixers. It's hard to trust Embiid in the playoffs, and who knows with the Bucks and Dame. So I would say I think the Knicks are. I think the Knicks could. They are willing to spend the money. They have a little bit of draft capital, and I think they could use that to maybe package Julius Randle for maybe a little bit better player who can stay healthy and really push them over the top above the Celtics.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've been harping on how much I love this Knicks team all episode, but I think they're going to be great. I think what they could do this offseason is almost going to be similar to what the Celtics did in adding that depth, and that's just what this team needs. I think they do. I think Tibbs is a great coach. Sure, he plays his guys too much, but he's a great coach. I think Jalen Brunson is a superstar in this league. Uh, I think they have almost all the tools. I just think it's a matter of staying healthy. Um, what if though? Let's just say the Celtics run through the East. Um, there might be some bias here. I'm a Timberwolves fan. You're a Thunder fan. But who do you like most in the West to beat them?
Um, Obviously, I'm gonna pick my Thunder. I think they're positioned to make a move. Um, if the Timberwolves and Thunder kind of stay put and they just run it back, and the Nuggets are somehow able to either keep KCP or and maybe just add one more piece, I think they should be the favorite though, because Jokic is still the best player in the NBA, and I don't. I don't think Michael Porter Jr. can have that bad of a series again. I think we'll see
Mm-hmm.
maybe a playoff revenge tour next season with him.
Yeah, now I'm torn a little bit on this in that I'm not gonna say Nuggets. I'm gonna say 1 and 2 for me are the Thunder and the Timberwolves. And I'll say this: I think if the Thunder do make a move, I would for a big name guy that really fits their system. I would put them as the favorites. I'm not sure if they're going to do that. We haven't really. That's the issue. We haven't really seen the Thunder make that big move with all the draft capital they have yet. I don't know what they're waiting for. I would love to see it happen. I don't
Yeah,
have no
Lowry
clue.
Markin. That's the name. That's what puts if they get Lowry Markin, I think they're the favorites over even Boston. But besides
Yeah,
that, I mean, unless we're talking someone like Giannis or Embiid, Lowry Markin is the best player they can really get from a
mm.
trade.
And then going over to the Timberwolves, I'm sure this will be a story that we are covering across the summer, across the offseason. But Karl Anthony Towns, what they'll do with him, I think there's so much room for growth for this team. There's also a lot of room to go downwards and maybe have a more disappointing year. Obviously, I think Edwards is going to be a better player. I think he's going to be what we saw early in the playoffs, which was just one of the best players in the league. I do think he has the potential to be one of the best players in the league next year. You saw what he did this year. I think he could. We talked about the top five earlier. We have four. I think he sort of fits what you're looking for in that superstar. He could be the fifth player. Not saying he will be. I think he could be. Um, so I'm not sure. I
I
think
think he could be definitely.
The Timberwolves could easily become the favorites this offseason. And I don't they could stay put or they could say they're the fourth best team in the West now. I would put them behind the Mavs and I would put them behind the Nuggets and the Thunder going into the season. But yeah, we'll see how things shake out with Karl Anthony Towns, and we'll see how things shake out with who the Thunder choose to target with all that draft capital they've built up. That will do it for this episode of the Shot Clock uh, Sports Podcast. Anything you want to add before we sign off, Jack?
Nope. Sounds good.
Great. Well, thank you guys for listening. Make sure to tune in next time and have a great night. See you, Jack.
See ya.